This is Dateline News and Conversation. This is a special report. I'm going to be talking with our good friend Stas Krapivnik from Moscow to get an update on the latest on the Crocus City terrorist attack. Stas, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Welcome. It's always nice to be welcome. Better news, but
so what is the latest? I'm reading on Russian media, 133 dead now confirmed, 180 wounded. I guess they're still finding bodies, but what's the latest? And of course, everybody in the West is speculating. And I get really tired of these people over there that, they're coming up with all of these theories about who done it, the CIA, the MI6, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So just tell me, what's the mood right now in Moscow?
Somewhere between shock and extreme anger. And the anger is going to be coming in a lot stronger as the shock wears off. I think I last heard when I was driving home right now, it was 136 now. So some of those wounded are probably going to die. And I'm sure they'll find more bodies as they start clearing away the wreckage. I know that area pretty damn well. Been there plenty of times. Expos. My daughters, when they were younger, they taught us some dance recitals there. In fact, my youngest daughter wanted to go to that concert, picnic. I grounded her for some stuff that she did, so she didn't go. One of her friends was there. A couple of other friends were in Crocus City Mall, which is connected to Crocus City Hall. It's a pretty big place. I mean, this is the right third of it, so it's 3 times larger than that. And then there's a huge, double huge mall, Crocus City Mall and Vegas Mall. So there's giant malls. So it's a pretty damn big place. I mean, it's got its own metro station. That's how big it is. And when these, I don't know if to call them subhumans. I don't want to add human to what they are. And this vermin did what they did. There was also a ballet dance recital that was going on with little girls. So there's a Philharmonica there that was playing before that, and people were still coming in for the concert. Could have been worse because it was 6,000 seats sold out concert. Who's behind this? Ukraine. Who's behind Ukraine? America and London, and Washington and London. I mean, I'm not going to mince words. This is CIA, MI6, Newland. What did Newland say a month ago? We've got a bunch of asymmetric surprises for Russia. Hey. 8th of March, U.S., London, Canada, put out warnings on their websites to their citizens not to gather in large crowds, anywhere in large crowds, not to go to concerts, because there may be a terrorist attack. While it was still going on, where the fire's going, nobody knows anything yet, but the Ukrainian Telegram and all these other channels, they start putting out photographs of Central Asian Muslims, which they were, by the way, but that we'll get to that in a second. It's not Ukrainians, it's these guys. So and then Washington right off the bat. I mean, this was in an hour. They run out there. Oh, it's not us, and it's not Ukraine. There's a saying in Russia: a thief yells thief loudest in the market. So yeah, it's Washington, and it's London, and it's Kyiv. And now down to these guys. So there's been 11 arrests. 4 of these were the guys that were committing the atrocity. Yes, they were all Tajiks. going further. One of them was stopped by his would-be victims. As he was reloading, a guy tackled him, started grabbing the rifle out of his hands, and then another guy came in there and they beat him down. He had wandered off from the other three. The other three were trying to get into Ukraine. They were stopped in Bryansk province on the border. So one of them is a citizen of Ukraine. Another one is an Islamic commander in one of the Islamic brigades fighting for the Nazis. Because, you know, between IGIL and the Ukrainian Nazis, ain't much difference. And they all have the same masters in the end. So yeah, they're and the Ukrainians were prepared a hole in the border for them to get across when they got all of them were caught, and they started singing. Great video of one of them on his knees as he's shaking in fear. The bastard was murdering women and children the other day. The day prior, he wasn't shaking it free from that. Why did they choose? Why did they choose Tajiks? They were recruited. At least, well, two of them were recruited. Two of them obviously were already in Ukraine. One being a citizen of Ukraine. And his identity, everything's been put up already on the net with his identity photos and everything else, his passports. Anatoly Yermakov. He's a SBU agent who's working out of the Ukrainian embassy in Tajikistan, recruiting jihadists. Why'd they do it? Because they didn't want it directly linked. So they're trying to make it, oh, it's IGIL. And so, interesting enough, Blinken knew which chapter of IGIL it was before IGIL even said it was IGIL that did it. It's very interesting how that timing. It's like when the towers in the Twin Towers collapsed. You know, the third tower that went down that was never hit by anything, and there was even a break in the news that it went down before it went down. Like, you know, they're missing the timing there a little bit. So yeah, so it's Ukraine, and who stands behind Ukraine? As the New York Post, the New York Times let us all know with great pride, the mouthpiece of the CIA. It's the CIA. It's the CIA that created the terrorist portions along with MI6 for 10 years. We're creating the terrorist portions in SBU, which is the security service of Ukraine. So where's the blood? Nuland is drenched in that blood. Biden is drenched in that blood. Every damn congressman that votes for this war is a murderer and a genocider and a killer of children, a satanic little bastard. I have nothing else I can say for these people. A few congressmen that have any humanity, Christianity, or anything in them, they're the exceptions of the U.S. government, which is a satanic entity, and London is no better. Sorry, that
yeah,
can't be cold and impartial on this.
Yeah, you mentioned the mood was kind of people are in shock, and you think that it's going to turn to anger. What I'd like to know from you now is how did you interpret President Putin's address to the nation? I thought he was being very restrained, but he was angry. He promised that everybody involved was going to pay for this. Now, if everybody involved turns out to be the CIA, the United States, MI6, whoever else is in line, Kiev, Zelensky, although I would guess that Zelensky probably didn't even know about it. What are your thoughts on President Putin's address to the nation?
Yeah, I think it was restrained. The nation's angry. I'll tell you one thing. If these subhuman idiots in Washington think they're going to scare Russians, I guarantee you Monday morning there'll be 3 times as many volunteers for the front. Most people want at least the center of Kiev, Bankovskaya, where all the the SBU headquarters, the Rada, and all the other branches of government. They wanted Gaza, if you know, understand what I'm saying. And believe me, if it goes to Newland, I hope she gets what she deserves. And every CIA agent that's in there. The strikes, there was actually a very large amount of strikes that were happening today on a border base that NATO uses to bring equipment into Ukraine. One of the missiles supposedly flew over Polish airspace. If Poles want to make a fight about it, we'll happily have a war with them. And I'll say another thing. Supposedly, Macron's already got troops in the country where they will be exterminated. They will be priority targets for extermination. There's no holding back. If the West wants a war, it'll have a war, including up to and including nuclear war. You're not going to scare Russians with war. Christ may say, for 1,000 friggin' years, the West has been invading us, and we've been butchering and burying them by generations. If they want to do it again, we will happily do it again. It's they're targeting children. There's not much more you can say to this. They're animals. The West is run by subhuman animals, and all the people that vote for them and support them are no better.
I can understand how you feel. I have some Russian friends here who really are in shock. Some 24 missiles, I guess, were fired over the weekend at Sevastopol. A couple of people died because of the debris that fell. A little bit of damage done to some buildings. But I wouldn't say that the people that I know are in shock. I think, they're very concerned. Let me put it that way. I wouldn't call it shock, but they're very concerned. I think it's keeping them up at night. I think they're beginning to realize now that this is an existential threat and a declared war on Russia. It's explicit in the United States public declarations that the goal is to get rid of Putin, to destroy the Russian Federation, to break it up and steal its resources. That is public United States declared policy against Russia. Now, I almost don't know what to say.
One thing to say to the American people, they better listen damn well. If they support these politicians that are going to go down this road, America will be a nuclear wasteland. Because there ain't no way in hell Russia's going down without taking America with it, and England and every other one of these Western shitholes. If they want to fight, they will get a nuclear fight. Russia ain't going down without all of them going down too. We've got more than enough arsenal to just exterminate all life in the Northern Hemisphere. The South will be happy. They'll get to live. The Northern Hemisphere is going to get wiped out. So look at your children and ask yourself, you want to see them turn into shadows on a wall? And if you don't, you better get off your ass and go do something about it. Because the politicians you have are leading us to nuclear war, and we will have it. We'll have a conventional war. It's already there. And NATO troops are in Ukraine, and they are being targeted. In fact, there were CIA and NATO trainers on that base that got hit heavy yesterday in response, or this morning, actually. Yesterday. And we will now target everything that NATO has in Ukraine. And if needs be, it'll go past Ukraine. If NATO wants a war, they've got the war. They've got the war on their hands. I mean, and while we're talking about it, Belgrade's getting hit. There are people murdered by Ukraine. I only say Ukraine, by the West. Because you can't do anything without the West. Ukraine is a non-entity. Everything is done. HIMARS are fired by Americans. They're armed by Americans. They're fired by Americans. They're guided by fucking American Army by Space Forces on target. It's Americans murdering Russians. There is no parsing this. America is at war with Russia. And all you morons that sat there on your arses worrying, oh, well, it's not major. It's major. And it's going to get a lot more major. And if you think you're sitting on the other side of the world and you won't be touched, snort the cocaine a little more. We don't need nuclear weapons to level New York. Kinetic energy weapons that are going at Mach 20, which is 25,000 kilometers per hour, which is about 4 kilometers per second. Your eye can't see it. The kinetic energy just off of those warheads will level large chunks of New York. You don't need nuclear weapons to level those cities. That's the technology we have. America doesn't have it because it can't come up with it. No, it's been trying, but we have it. If it needs to be demonstrated, this is the way they're going to it. You're not going to live long enough to get to Trump and maybe have some kind of peace, because Biden's going to take you all to hell with him. And the rest of those satanic bastards are going to sacrifice you all on that altar, on their satanic altar. So either the public does something or the public goes the way it goes. And usually the public will sit on its arse and then whine, why us? Why did this happen? Yeah, I'm angry.
So, yeah. Well, I think you and everybody else in Russia, especially people in Moscow, have a right to be angry. They've been taking so much, the numerous terrorist attacks, drone attacks even on the Kremlin, for crying out loud, and all across Crimea, Belgorod. But something really significant happened this past week. Putin's spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, he said, and I'm going to paraphrase, this is no longer a special military operation, it's war. Stas, when I read that, I went, okay, now it's out in the open. Russia finally realizes it's not just about a proxy thing happening in Ukraine. It's a war. And what that means, it's a war against NATO and it's a war against the United States. How else can that be interpreted, Stas?
It's been a war. Peskov is voicing what's been obvious for the last year and a half. Special military operation ended in all reality, except in name. The special military operation ended the moment Biden and Johnson torpedoed the peace deal in 23 or 22 March 2022. At that point, there is no more special operations. At that point, there's war. And very quickly, that group passed a proxy war. From day one, there were NATO troops in Ukraine participating, either as instructors or as maintenance or as guiding those vehicles. When the HIMARS and such equipment arrived and the Patriots, those are manned by NATO soldiers. NATO soldiers are being burnt to hell. Every time we hit one of those, we take out a bunch of NATO troops. Those French volunteers and aid workers, you mean from the French Foreign Legion? Yeah, well, several hundred of them have already been killed. We'll kill more. We'll kill every last one of them if we need to. So again, the people of France, as long as Macron is alive and as long as he's in power, you're going to be dying. And the vast majority of the people, 79% by the last poll, said, no, we don't want any troops sent. But again, the peasants don't give a, well, they're not even peasants. The serfs don't have a voice. Macron is their owner. So unless they storm the Bastille again, the future of the French male population is going to be pretty damn bleak. And it ain't going to be any other way. And the 82nd Airborne, 101st Airborne, 6th Cavalry, how long do you think those are going to stay in a real fight? The vast majority of the Russian military isn't in Ukraine yet, or in a fight anywhere yet. There's about 30% of the Russian military in that fight. And if we start full mobilization, that's another 32 million. That's another 32 million soldiers and officers who have military training and/or combat experience. Not all. The majority don't have combat experience, but they have military training. So all those obese boys in the U.S., yeah, they're going to make real big targets because there ain't enough manpower in the U.S. That was a problem back in 1997, 98. We were discussing that issue as officers. And if the draft comes, already there was not enough manpower in the U.S. Consider the obesity rate at that point was about 28%. It's 40% now. The obesity rate in the U.S. Army is 20%. At that point, there was maybe 1% or less, probably less, I have to say. There was no obesity in the U.S. Army. And if you got fat, that was stopped pretty damn quick. Now it's 20%. All those fat boys are going to be dropping from heart attacks before they get a bullet in their chest. So that's the state of the U.S. Army. But if they want to fight, it's going to be a fight. You know, the reason the fight with Ukrainians is so hard is Ukrainians are Russians. And Russians don't like giving up. And they're just bullheaded, and they'd rather throw themselves with a mine under an enemy tank and take it out with them than surrender. And that's the thing is we're fighting ourselves in Ukraine. Ain't nothing that the U.S. has ever dealt with. They need to find some old Germans and ask them what it was like. Because I'll tell you what, all the legends about how Russia just buried the Germans in bodies, that's all they are, is legends. By 1944, the Germans were losing more men than the Russian army. Kaliningrad, or Königsberg at that point, is a prime example. Königsberg from day one was built as a medieval fortress city. It was reinforced and reinforced and reinforced by the Nazis. 120,000 men were in Königsberg. That's the garrison. They're supposed to hold out for 6 months at a minimum. They held out for 2 weeks. And the Red Army lost less troops than the defenders. And if that didn't spell the end of the Third Reich, nothing else could have. Louder than that. When the main fortress city in the north fell within 2 weeks of fighting. Now, if you want to fight that kind of army, especially that kind of army has been bloodied for 2 years now, let's do it. I mean, behind our backs are our children and women and children. Yeah, we're not stepping back. So if NATO wants to, let's go. We'll see what NATO's made out of. And honestly, NATO ain't made of much. Out of 200,000 troops in the Ukrainian army, there's 20,000 combat troops, combat-capable troops. And France is one of the bigger ones. The Germans are even worse off. I mean, that's what we're at.
Up until now, Russian strategy seems to have been bend but don't break. Don't get provoked by a quid pro quo type of reaction. They've been really patient with this strategy. But given what's happened at the Crocus City Hall, the massacre, and it's a massacre, the anger that the people are feeling, I think the anger that Putin is feeling, Shoigu and the military have got to be, I mean, they must be chomping at the bit to want to finish this. The United States and those who control the United States, they have kept crossing Russia's red lines. Now that Peskov has made it clear that Russia is at war, its survival is what's at stake, do you think that Russia will hit them where they're at, like Putin said, in Brussels, in London, in Paris, in Berlin, in Amsterdam, in New York City? Do you think, is Russia bluffing? Is Putin bluffing? Or is he serious that when they find out who really ultimately was responsible, they would all be punished? What does he mean?
You know, You're familiar with the Troubles?
Yeah.
Not the time of Troubles. That's our 1600s history. The Troubles, North Ireland. When did the North Irish, the peace accords come around to end the Irish Civil War? They came around when the IRA took the fight to the English elites. Not to the English bobbies, not to the English army. No, that was pointless. They fought back and forth raids and sniper fire and bombing each other. Yeah, that didn't go anywhere because the English elites didn't give a damn. They don't give a damn how many peasants die. That's just meat and a statistic. That's it. The people of the West are nothing but meat for the elite. It doesn't matter what you call your government. Communist, monarchy, republic, it's all the same in the end. Those peace accords came around the moment the elites started getting turned into meat. When the IRA went after the elites, oh, they decided they wanted peace real quick after that one, because then it became personal. And until the American and the British and the German and the French and the Italian and the Polish, first of all, elites feel the pain, until it gets personal to them, this isn't going to stop. How that gets done, by whom that gets done, I'll leave that up to other entities. And that's my prognosis.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the elites. I've had a number of shows with people who have made it clear who the elites are. They trace it back to the City of London, the Crown, the royal line, bloodlines, and all across Europe. And these people have names. The Rothschilds and that family are huge members of this elite that you're talking about. And who is it that profits from war and the killing? These people that are incredibly wealthy, that basically control the world. They're the ones that are playing Russian roulette.
Yeah, you got the Rothschilds on one side, you got the Rockefellers on the other. The Morgans are still around. All these families are still around. They may have changed Statoil into Exxon, but nothing's particularly changed. You know, just so people understand, when Obama was president, there was a 12-year-old girl who got grants to university because she worked out the family tree of 43 presidents, because Obama was 43rd, not to the 1600s, but to the 1200s. An interesting thing at that moment, was that except for one American president, every one of those presidents had the same root. King John Prescott. Go figure. King John Prescott, who, if anybody remembers Robin Hood was, of course, a fictitious character, but King John wasn't. While King Richard Lionhearted was off crusading, King John sat the throne, and on his way back, Richard got captured by the Austrians, who threw him in a dungeon and wanted ransom. So King John, who never intended to ransom his brother and give up the throne, but he started squeezing all his barons, wound up in a civil war, lost that civil war, signed the Magna Carta, which he never upheld, hired a huge army of pagans out of Denmark, and started butchering his own people again. And then got defeated again, and then died drowned in a river. I'm not sure which river, but drowned in a river trying to save his gold while they were retreating. And that is the root of all American presidents. Well, except for two now. And guess who those two were? Kennedy and Trump. Yeah, Obama's one of those. Obama's a third cousin to Dick Cheney, if nobody knows that. They should know that. So yes, the American elite is one big happy clan. And the Bushes and the Clintons came out of two neighboring towns, and they were intermarrying before the 1600s, where their direct ancestors started moving to the U.S. So this is just one big happy clan. Just food for thought.
Yeah. I want to ask you the final question that I have for tonight. It's extremely important. Vladimir Putin was reelected last week. 87% of the Russian people voted for him. I don't even want to get into all the crap that the Western media in Washington and everybody else saying that the election was not valid. It was not really an election because there was only one candidate. Let's not get into that. I don't care what they say. I'm disgusted by what they're saying because it's the same old crap. But what I'd like to hear from you is, what is the significance of Putin's reelection with 87% of the vote at this particular time in history? What is the importance to the Russian people and the significance?
Now, there were four candidates. There were more candidates they filed, but most of those candidates had a lot of issues in their filing, such as a lot of either non-existent in the petitions, either a lot of non-existent people or dead people that signed. The Chicago thing. The Democrats are really good at. So out of those four candidates, there was 77% voting rate. What's the U.S. on average? 50, something like that, less than 60 at best. Unless, of course, you're just counting extra votes, the mystery votes that keep showing up in boxes after hours. 87%. And by the way, he met with all three of the other candidates, and they discussed what their positions were and how they could find a middle ground and work forward together. Of course, that's not going to be in the Western media either. Yeah, I voted for Putin. I'm not afraid to say it. And as many times I've voted in the U.S., I will tell you, every single time I voted in the U.S., it was hold your nose and pick the less smelly shit out of the two shit candidates that you've got to choose from, that the elites gave you to choose from. It wasn't a vote of hope. This was the first time I voted in a vote of hope. In the U.S., it was never a vote of hope. It was a vote of, I guess it was hope. It was, I hope the shit doesn't go even worse than it'll go with this guy. So I'm voting for that guy because it'll be less shit. Pardon my French. And that's voting in the U.S. I never voted for Reagan. I'm just too young, so maybe Reagan was the only type vote that you would vote with hope. But every other hope was just, who's the worst, who's the lesser of the two stinking piles that the elites have given you to choose from. And there's not that much of a difference between any of them. By the way, there isn't a single Democrat program that the Republicans have ever canceled. Let that sink in. They modify them for what's better for them, for their lobbyists, but they've never canceled a single program and never will. Because basically they're working in tandem. Now, with this, what I've heard from a lot of people is they're hoping for a hard line against the liberals that have been betraying the country and against the West to end this war and make sure the West has no longer a threat to Russian existence. He's got the mandate. So, and after this attack, it's going to have a hell of a lot more of a mandate. I know more than a few people that didn't like Putin when this war started. They didn't like him. They didn't vote for him. They now put candles for his health and pray for his health. Because they've all come to understand that without a strong leader in this, we won't have a country left. Our children don't have a future. Probably won't have their lives. It's a fight to the end. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. And all these moronic half-wits in the West sitting around thinking, oh, they're gonna get rid of Putin and they're gonna split up the country and get another Yeltsin like in, and all the good times in the '90s are coming back. No. Best case scenario, you lose. Worst case scenario, you lose in a nuclear wasteland. So it's at that level.
You mentioned something that I've heard a couple of times from my friends, they're Russians. This election was a statement to all of those Russians who might be considered Western leaning liberal capitalists who are still here griping, and many are very powerful and influential. Some of my friends have said, maybe it's time for these guys to read the handwriting on the wall and leave. I mean, do you think that's part of what the message will be to these people who have opposed President Putin, who have opposed patriotic conservative Russians? What are your thoughts?
I don't like using the word capitalist because a lot of the people who voted on the word capitalist voted for Putin. Financial elite. They're tied to the citizens of the world. That's a key phrase when somebody tells you, I'm a citizen of the world. It means he's got no loyalty but to his money. Whenever they tell you that, it means you're meat for their machinations, and they have no loyalty but to their money. So you hear that, and those people, and that's a good thing, interesting thing too, is a lot of them can't leave anymore. Because the moment they leave, they're no longer needed by the West. A lot of these oligarchs and others, in London, they're stripping them of their funds. They're stealing them. The thieves are stealing from the thieves. So that's an interesting little query for them. Where do you go? That the West won't rob you and toss you aside because you're no longer needed by them. You didn't start the revolution that you were supposed to start. So bye-bye. We'll just take your money and be gone now. So either turn loyal to Russia or wind up with nothing. By the hands of your own masters in the West.
So I want to ask you this. You've been very popular on Russian television as an analyst of what's happening in Ukraine. You mentioned earlier in this podcast that Russia has unleashed some massive airstrikes really all over Ukraine, knocking out infrastructure, power lines, power supply, depots and factories where they're manufacturing things, and troop locations. Do you think, given what's happened, what we've been talking about tonight, that Russia really will finally unleash the dogs of war and finish this thing in Ukraine?
It's coming. The ground isn't quite dry yet. Now, by the way, as you know, we're taking out the electric stations and everything else. It's +6, +7 during the day, about -0, -1, -2 at night here in Moscow. And next week is going to be up to +13, +14. In the south, all around Ukraine, it's +15, +14 during the day. It's already about +5 at night. So we didn't hit them in the dead of winter. We didn't take out the electricity in the dead of winter. We didn't take out the heating stations in the dead of winter. Doing it now where the vast majority of the population isn't going to freeze to death. They're going to be miserable. They're not going to be freezing to death. As opposed to the West. The West actually just be bombing apartment buildings, Gaza style. Because that's what the West does. And has done for hundreds of years. Extermination, genocide. So.
Wow. I can understand and appreciate your anger and your frustration. I would have to guess that an awful lot of Russians feel just like you do. I think everybody in Russia is probably waiting to see what Putin really meant by punishing those who were involved in this, wherever they are. I have to think that that's what people are thinking about. I mean, that was pretty powerful statement when he said they will be punished. What do you expect in the next few days?
Well, I don't know what to expect. What I'd like to see is the SBU skyscraper headquarters leveled down to its foundation. For the Rada to be leveled down to its foundation. Rada is the parliament. And any pro-peace parties anyways. It's all Zelensky's party and a few other allied parties are all that's left. Everybody else has been banned. The leadership arrested or murdered or on the run. So, no big loss if the Rada is no longer a building standing. Vankova, which is the street that they're all located on, should be Gaza. That's what I'd like to see. And then, personally, less aiming at the Ukrainian army, more aiming at any CIA bases, MI6 bases, NATO troops, instructors, what have you. Let them suffer, because they're the animals that trained and set all of this in motion from day one. So they really should be the animals that are suffering the most, because they're the ones that did this.
Do you think that Russia now will go much deeper into Ukraine, all the way to Odessa, maybe even to Kiev?
No, Odessa, that's not even a question. Odessa will be taken. The question is how further west. Western Ukraine, it'd be better off if the Poles took it, and then we'll just feed the Ukrainian Nazis with the weapons, and then the Poles can go kill each other for the next 30 years. They deserve each other. Yeah, cynical, but hey. Now we'll take the Russian to us. We'll take our historical lands. Actually, I mean, all of Western Ukraine is our historical lands. But okay, fine. It stopped being our historical lands 500 years ago. We're gonna live with that. But Central Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine, that's all Russian historical lands. Absolutely. And not from 500 years ago. So that's all going back. And if it takes all of NATO's corpses that we have to drive over to get to make sure that gets done, then fine, whatever. Believe me, most people don't give a damn right now. They want the West to pay. The good thing about the SVO is all the masks came off. I mean, they really did come off. And things I've been telling people for 10 years before that, and they didn't want to believe it, including people in government. They didn't want to believe it. Well, now they got no choice, because it's been thrown in their faces. It's how much these people in the West, these elites, and all their supporters really despise and hate us on a genetic level. Okay, fine. It's their right. But expect that, we're not the Jews of 1936, 37, 38 Germany. We have a huge country, and we have a big army. And no, we're not going to get rounded up into concentration camps. And if they don't understand that, whatever, it's their problem. It's going to be their problem. I said, those French soldiers across the border, already across the border, I implore you, I beg you, write a letter to your mothers and your wives. You're not coming home.